Hello everyone, I hope you're keeping well during this cold winter period we're having here in the UK. So we're talking about squeaks and rattles today. So one of my biggest pet hates with any car, van, any kind of motor transport is squeaks and rattles. Especially when something's brand new, you don't expect it to have any squeaks or rattles or anything else. However, I think invariably they usually do. The Tesla that we've got has some squeaks and rattles which I've sorted. But actually our 16-year-old Discovery 3 that we've got doesn't really have any, which is quite interesting. But our brand new California, our 6.1, I say brand new, it's just over 6 months old now. Actually, this did have quite a few squeaks and rattles when we bought it, and I kind of almost can understand why, because it's quite a complicated vehicle. It's got loads of cupboards and trim and everything else. There's always the potential for something to make a little bit of noise. And I think they split into two categories. I think they split into noises which you either generate yourself, or it's because something hasn't been put away properly, or it's something rattling which is easy to sort by moving something. And there's trim squeaks, kind of funny noises and things which need sorting because they're just not going to go away unless you do something about them in some way. So I've got a few tips for you in this video. Hopefully what I'm going to do is just run through a few of the different ones that we found on the van, different ways to remedy them. We have got a very quick initial tip for you if you're going to do any of these things, especially for trim rattles and those kind of things, and that is to buy some tape like this. So this is cloth tape, it's loom tape. They use it to wrap wiring looms and things in cars, because again it stops them rattling and making noise against the bodywork and things. You can buy this, I'll put a link in the description below. Buy 3 or 4 rolls of it. That's usually the best way. You won't get through that much of it just by doing a few bits in the van, but you'll probably have it for life then, and it's buy it once and then just keep it handy. We actually now keep a roll of this in one of the seat backs in the van, because if we find a new rattle or a squeak when we're out and about, it's easy just to silence it usually with some of this. So let's get on with it. We'll give you a bit of a tour around the van, all the different bits and bobs that we found. Some of these are 6.1 specific, some of them are T6 specific, slash kind of Ocean or original California T5, T5.1 SE related, i.e. with the kitchen and things. Some are just general trim related. So let's have a wander around and I'll show you the kind of things that we found. Okay, so one of the first squeaks that we got when we picked up the van was from this corner here. And you can see this bit of trim here on the door pillar squeaked against this bit here. So again, a little bit of tape. So you just slide the tape under. You can use a little plastic trim tool or something like that just to put it under it. And again, if you wanted to, you could trim a bit of this off at the top here just so you can't see it too much. But just a little bit just underneath there, just stop that kind of creaking and rattling as we were driving along. So that was number one. Number two are these windows. Now, I can't say I'm a huge fan of these new window designs with the bits that you squeeze here to be able to open the window and things. Compared to the T6 we had before, I didn't have any noise out of those whatsoever. I know some people have had problems with them being particularly difficult with water coming in, those kind of things, but we never had any of those problems. However, what we do find is that these do creak an awful lot. So all the way around the edges, all the kind of the way that it hooks in down here, when you squeeze these and move it around, and when it clips back in, it does make a lot of noise. So we used, originally when we got the van, it was terrible, so we thought we'd put some silicone spray down in here and at the top and round it. That made it even worse. So although the window was super easy to open and close, actually it made it really bad. So what we did in the end was I ended up taking the windows out, which sounds very dramatic, and it's quite tricky on this side actually, because you've got the blind at the top, it makes it quite tricky. But effectively you can maneuver the window in a way that you can actually take the window out. I cleaned with some alcohol all around the edge of the window, all the different sides, and there's a couple of plastic sliders on the bottom of the window in here. So when you slide it like this, there's actually a couple of plastic sliders inside, and they were the bits that were rattling. So I put a bit of cloth tape around those plastic sliders, and lo and behold, nice and quiet. Again, if you know, I think in days of old you'd have probably thought those would be nice little wheels, or there'd be, you know, something which wouldn't just be plastic on plastic. But I think, you know, that's modern manufacturing for you, and there's no escaping that. That's not a California thing, that's just a general manufacturing piece. So we did that on both windows on both sides because they were both really noisy. Just while we're on the kitchen side, one of those rattles that you can get if you're not careful and you wonder where it's coming from. Let me just wind the seat forward a second. So one of the rattles which you can get is if you've had the tap like this and you put this down, so effectively the tap goes down with it, then underneath there the tap sometimes rattles against the glass at the top. So just make sure that the tap is down, so when you put this down you don't get that rattle. And obviously it goes without saying that, you know, make sure your cabinet tops are actually down. Second little rattle, apologies for the dirtiness in here, we need to give it a bit of a clean. The second rattle from this area, we find underneath this hob there's a load of wires and pipes and all sorts which connect things like the igniter to each of these burners, and it's supposed to have little cable ties around it from the factory and things, and you can see underneath through a couple of little holes underneath here where all the wires are, and sometimes those little cable ties move and it means that the wires rattle underneath, which again can be tricky to find, but if you know, at least you can have a look and you can see whether you can spot it. So that's another good one there. Now a lot of you might think that we get a lot of noise from the cupboards because of how much stuff we've got and kind of how it's in there, but actually they're not too bad. And these Brandrup mats, which are pre-cut for the shelves, actually make quite a big difference. They do help. They do help a lot in terms of stopping things moving around. So that's obviously on a rubbery mat, that's the same. And actually we really don't find it's too much of a problem. The only thing that you can sometimes get, and if I show you in this side here, we were obviously in a hurry when we put this away last time. Things like this just being kind of loose in here, and again plastic on plastic, has a real potential for rattling, but it's actually not that bad. I think because when the door goes across, it deadens a bit of the noise. I think that helps specifically with it. Just one other thing, we did put some silicone spray in the rails down here because these doors were really stiff when we first got the van, and actually it has made them an awful lot better, and it didn't make it creak or anything else. So that's another good tip if they feel a bit stiff. Now it's probably fair to say that we've had a few noises from the bench seat, and thankfully it's not because we installed the little drawer. We had them before that. And actually what we found was after we'd moved the bench seat forward or back or anything like that after a camping trip, after about 2 or 3 miles of driving, we would find that we've got this kind of weird squeaking, kind of almost like a turkey gobbling kind of noise. It was a really, really weird noise. And Sarah ended up driving with me sitting in the back here. And I had to try and kind of, while belted in and leaning down, I had to try and find out where it was coming from. And what we found was that if we were driving along, if I lifted this, the noise went away, and if I let it go, so it was latched back again, we got the noise back. So it had to be something to do with the latching mechanism in here. Now, if any of you have ever looked at any of the diagrams of the bench seat or anything like that, you'll know that it's quite, I wouldn't say it's an involved job, but it's quite a time-consuming job to get to any of the latching mechanism or anything else. So basically you take this center drawer out, which has got 2 screws inside, and you lift it off the rails in a very similar way to the small drawer. And then inside there's a big steel panel on this side, and then there's another one on this side, because there are latching mechanisms on both rails. And there's about 10, 12 bolts which hold that metal cover on either side. And to get to some of those, you have to take the seat belt off the back and all sorts. But once you've got that panel off, inside, you're then able to see the whole latching mechanism and loads of springs and wheels and levers and all sorts. And I greased all of those on both sides, and it's now gone. Which is actually a bit of a shame, because we'd nicknamed this particular noise in the van because it almost felt like a bit of a friend, actually. And we do feel a bit guilty for getting rid of it now, because we called it Bernard. And anyone in the UK will probably get the reference for Bernard from Bernard Matthews. And if you are outside of the UK and you Google Bernard Matthews, you'll see that he does turkeys and those kind of things. So it's all derived from that. However, Bernard has been silenced, and we don't hear from Bernard anymore. I don't really want to hear from Bernard, to be honest with you. But Bernard's been silenced, and the true story is that Bernard actually joined us on our way back from the Outer Hebrides, and we were driving back from Fort William and hit a huge pothole in the road. Didn't do any damage to the van or any of the wheels or anything like that, but hit a huge pothole in the road, and Bernard arrived after that. So for whatever reason, it obviously decided it was going to dislodge something or move something around in one of the mechanisms to the point where it started making a turkey gobbling noise. And we had it all the way back from the Outer Hebrides. We've been living with it around where we live and everything else until recently, when we went through that exercise of sorting Bernard out. So Bernard is no more, I'm afraid. But I'm sure we'll have other squeaks and rattles in the future, which we'll be naming too. Anyway, onward with some more. Now there's another one with the fold-out table, which is a rattle. Took us a little while. It's quite a common one. And what happens is, if you're putting the table away and you don't give it just slight pressure when you're putting it away, you can get it so that it's like this. And if I just show you in here, sorry, this is a bit awkward. You see down the bottom there how it's not latched in properly. So if I pull this and then just put slight pressure on it as I push it back, that's what holds it in place. And again, I don't know if you can see that down there, but it's nicely clipped in. So good one to check. Again, if you hear a kind of rattling noise from the back, just check your tables away properly. Okay, so one of the next squeaks and rattles we wanted to share with you that we've sorted is actually from this area here. So when you got the blind pulled across, there was like a rattling noise just here. Couldn't understand it. So what we did was put a piece of cloth tape on here. So all the way across, that's a metal part of the bed. That's a metal part of the bed just there. We just decided to put a piece of cloth tape all the way across, and guess what? Silence again. The other one that I was going to mention while we're here as well is we were driving along and thought, Christ, there's some tinkling sound up here. It was kind of above the driver's head. Couldn't understand it. And actually what it was, the zip on the opening part of the front canvas, the actual zipper, so the opening bit of the zipper, we'd left kind of about 20 centimetres up on the right hand side, and it was rattling against the blind which comes across. So all we do now is just make sure that the zippers are right at the bottom and it doesn't rattle anymore, which is good. So if you've been driving the van on your own, had somebody else in the passenger seat and then they've gone and then it starts rattling, first thing to check is whether the seatbelt has been left in a place where it's going to rattle. And it's quite easy because you've got the armrest here and everything else, but actually it's quite a, if you look where the armrest goes, you can actually find a place for the seatbelt because you've got that thing which moves up and down. It's quite easy to find a place where you can put it where it doesn't then rattle. So definitely worth a look if you've suddenly got quite a loud rattle in the front after you've had a passenger in here. Right, one of the other things that we had was a bit of noise from the passenger seat, and it was a bit of a creak really more than anything. And whenever we accelerated and there was a bit of pressure on the back of the seat or you brake and it kind of comes forward again, we used to get this creaking noise, definitely from the base. I happened to be in the passenger seat when it was doing it, and I got hold of the lever, just turned the seat very slightly as we were driving along, and it stopped it. So that said to me it was definitely something to do with the mechanism underneath. Spun the seat round slightly and then had a look at the base, and what we found was these are the kind of mounting lugs as to where the seat actually latches into when you turn it round. And if you look under here, you can probably see there's some plastic pieces just in there, if the camera will focus. Yeah, there's some plastic pieces in there. So what we did was we lubricated all those up. You can see again just in there, there's a point where it latches into. So we lubricated all those up with some silicone, and lo and behold, seat latches in nicely, and that is it. It's solved our creaking. So round at the back here we had quite a noisy rattle from this new door, and you can still hear it a bit now. However, what we've done with that one is the trusty cloth tape top and bottom on those latches, just so, again, if you look at the way that these are constructed, you end up with plastic on plastic. It's not a really close fit, so it ends up rattling, but at least now with a bit of cloth tape on, that bit of it doesn't rattle in the way that it did. On both our 6.1, so this van, and also our T6 that we had before, we also had problems with this top corner of the airline cabinet. So if you see where I am, so that's the airline cabinet at the top. This corner here, and also this corner here, and you'll see I've put trusty cloth tape just to the edge, because when you shut it, it ends up touching the roof liner, and again, with a bit of movement in the van, when you go over bumps, you end up with squeaking. So again, just a little bit in each corner, and that resolves that nice and quickly. Now, any owner of a California which has had one for a while will know that this can be a real pain in the neck sometimes for noise. It's one of those ones that you tend to forget about and actually can cause quite a lot of noise if it's not either seated properly. So when you wind it back up, if you haven't wound it up either tight enough, sometimes if you wind it up too tight, it makes noise. So just try and be natural with it when you put it in. But if you're driving along and you can hear a kind of a rattling noise or anything like that, good idea just to get your window down, get your arm out, reach up, just grab hold of this here, squeeze it together and see if it stops the noise, because if it does, you know it's the awning which is rattling outside. And it's surprising how much noise it makes inside. You've got to remember that the awning is mounted hard onto the van, so anything rattling in here does end up vibrating inside the van. You can hear it inside the van. So a good tip just to get the window down, put your arm out, hold on to the awning, see if it's that which is making the noise, if you've got something which is new and driving you mad. So other things that you may want to consider if you're starting to use things like carabiners for dog leads, those kind of things. We coated this carabiner, as you can see, in some cloth tape. Again, just stops it rattling away. You've got metal on metal there because it's at the bottom of the seat belt. So again, just anything like that you can do just ends up helping. We tend to actually leave a bin bag inside the bin as well, even when we're not in the van or not using it, because again, it stops the bin rattling against the side and those kind of things. So it does make quite a difference too. So one final bit then, just where we've put tape originally and then we've actually put some silicone on instead now, is underneath the bench seat here. So you see where I am, we've got the bench seat. Under here, you might be able to see, probably a bit tricky, just in here on both sides, there's 4 round rubber grommets which the bench seat sits on, and from the factory they're just rubber pushed into metal, and then you've obviously got the bench seat sat on top of them, and they squeak, so that you get kind of a rubbery squeak. This wasn't Bernard was definitely the mechanism, and we didn't get around to naming this particular squeak, but what we found was that a bit of silicone just on those rubbers in there made a world of difference. The way you get to those, if you need to have a look at those, is you slide the bench seat forward, then you can lift the bench seat up once you've got it in its downward place, and you'll be able to see those rubbers. I'll show you now. Okay, so if you look what happens when I push this seat down, you see that came up then. So this comes up. If we now look under here, you will see a rubber there and a rubber there, and they sit against the metal here. Now we actually have done belt and braces because we put some cloth tape on top here, as well as then putting silicone on those rubbers, but that's where they are. And again, if you need to, you can lift this up and you can see them just there. So again, cloth tape on the bottom and then rubbers there. Definitely worth checking out if you've got a weird kind of squeaking. So hopefully that gives you a bit of insight how to solve some of these rattles and where you might find them. Use the cloth tape, silicone spray, links in the description below. Definitely worth investing in. They're only a few pounds each, and will silence so many of the different noises you end up getting out of the California when you get one. So hopefully this video has been useful for you. If you like this kind of content, then please like our video, give us a thumbs up on it, and subscribe to the channel to be notified when we're creating more content for you. So hope that's been useful. See you again soon for some more California time.